Tom Bauer Chapter 25.4 I Don't Want to Be Alive. Hello, welcome back to my reading of Harry's wife's various complaints and behaviors. All seen through the lens of narcissism. Often awake during the night. Harry's wife and Harry class themselves as persecuted outsiders, paranoia, pity play. I just didn't see a solution, said Harry's wife. Eventually she decided I just didn't want to be alive anymore. I suspect this is a revision of history that either she did feel that way, driven by her narcissism as a response to the threats to control, which wasn't a realistic response, or that it never actually occurred and was invented thereafter for the purposes of drawing a pity play, smearing people by suggesting they hadn't been helpful and supportive, of course, to enable her to assert control and draw fuel. Harry would later say that Harry's wife had told him about her suicidal thoughts and the practicalities of how she was going to end her life. Suicidal feelings are usually the product of a profound psychological disorder. But Harry insisted that his wife, while she recited her thoughts, was completely sane and absolutely sober. Harry's wife's reason for contemplating suicide was the critical media. "I'm somewhat ashamed," admitted Harry, "of the way that I dealt with it." Exhibition of emotional empathy. He had good reason to feel remorse despite his expertise on mental health. He did little to summon specialist help for his wife, which either suggests that Prince Harry was entirely incompetent or that she didn't actually say anything about it at all, or perhaps made the briefest of mentions and it wasn't done in a serious way, not in the dramatic way that has been reported. After all, he had been in therapy, he knew about issues with mental health. If he saw that his wife was really struggling to the extent that she claimed, he would easily be able to recognizing the signs, also given what he had experienced, to put in place mechanisms to ensure that she was supported. To complain that that could not be done tends to suggest the natural fact, nothing actually of the case happened. He would accuse his family of neglect, but he also offered contradictory versions. In one, he did not tell them about Harry's wife's crisis, but in another version, Harry said that ever since Harry's wife had begun suffering suicidal thoughts, he had discussed with his family the idea of leaving Britain. The conversations about the possibility of living in another country revealed. Harry continued for over a year. Presumably, if those conversations were taking place, other members of the royal family didn't just sit there po-faced, that they would have suggested that some kind of help was obtained. And again, it shows with Harry because he's not very bright. This shifting in narrative is a product rather of the way that he's being treated by his wife, and his own emotional thinking caused him to be drawn into the fantasy world that she has created. The seriousness of Harry's wife's plight was dramatically revealed on the 16th of January 2019. That evening, the Sussexes were the star guests at the Royal Albert Hall to see Cirque du Soleil, although both smiled broadly as they arrived and she looked as glamorous as ever. Harry's wife would later claim that she could only overcome the previous night's suicidal thoughts by holding Harry's hand particularly tight. Well, if that's the case, she must feel suicidal every single time that she goes out somewhere, because the grip of doom is demonstrated every single fucking time that she turns up somewhere holding his hand like a pathetic 13-year-old. Once the lights went down, she said, "I was just weeping and he was gripping my hand." She begged Harry not to leave her alone. Although 6 months pregnant, said Harry's wife, she had not wanted to live. She said she had sought medical help from one of the most senior people in the palace, but said Harry's wife that help was denied by a woman employed in human resources with the explanation, "It would not be good for the institution." "My heart goes out to you," the woman allegedly said. "Don't believe that was ever said. This is an invention because I see how bad it is. But there's nothing we can do to protect you because you're not a paid employee of the institution." I don't believe anybody would have said that to her. And moreover, even if they had, what's stopping her picking up a telephone and ringing somebody in the United States, ringing one of her friends? Hell, use this thing called fucking Google. You use it often enough to find out what people are saying about you. Just banging, "I'm feeling suicidal," and boom. I should imagine the telephone number for the Samaritans pops up after that. Snub Harry's wife explained, "I just didn't want to be alive anymore." And that was a very clear and real and frightening, constant thought. "And I remember how Harry just cradled me." She could not go to a doctor or a hospital, she explained later, because they had taken my passport, my driver's license, my keys. She was trapped. The last time I attended a hospital, I didn't need my driver's license and I didn't need my passport. Indeed, I would only need my keys to get back into my house. I would have needed any keys to go to the hospital, so she could have gone outside and flagged down a taxi. She could have jumped on the back of a Domino's pizza delivery driver and said, "Take me to a hospital please, pizza boy." But no, apparently, and this is a revision of history because it never fucking happened. Her narcissism invents this concept of the fact that she couldn't go because they persons unknown had taken her passport, driver's license and keys. The thing that stopped her from seeing it through, added Harry, was how unfair it would be on me after everything that had happened to my mom, and to now be put in a position of losing another woman in my life with a baby inside of her. Our baby again, that's being told to him to flatter him for the purpose of a certain control over him. Verifying those events is difficult. Pertinently, Harry and Harry's wife gave conflicting accounts of the saga, which is Mr. Bauer's polite way of saying he doesn't believe it in public. They disagreed whether Harry's wife felt suicidal at night, in the morning, or both, and they did not agree on the number of days. Neither explain why Harry's wife sought help from an unqualified palace official rather than experienced medical specialist. Harry never identified which member whose family had neglected his wife. Harry's wife's instability traumatized Harry. After sacrificing so much to marry into the royal family, she told him she had become an unprotected target, guilt-tripping him. Harry felt guilty for failing to shield her from the conspirators. He struggled to find a solution, and thus this chapter ends on that recollection of an event which evidentially based clearly did not occur. Now, of course, appears Morgan expressed his views that he didn't believe that it occurred either, and faced much backlash for not taking somebody who apparently was suicidal seriously. What has to be understood is that narcissists will often utilize a suicide threat for the purpose of assertion of control. They will actually claim they're going to do it, but not do it. Sometimes there will be a revision of history to say that's how they were feeling, but it wasn't actually the case. And of course all of these things are matters which are generated, as always, in the pursuit of the prime aims. The problem with behavior such as this, of course, is that it undermines those who are legitimately experiencing suicidal thoughts, causing them to be less believed because of charlatans like her peers. Morgan expressed his opinion, and Mr. Bauer has seen clearly that there were so many conflicting accounts of what actually occurred that it would call into question whether it actually did. I'm fairly certain that if a judge was assessing this as a matter of evidence, he would find that it would be unreliable in terms of making any firm conclusion. Thus, chapter of 25 comes to a conclusion. Unsurprisingly, chapter 26 follows on, but that will come on another day. For now, you need to ensure that you've liked all of today's videos, that you send some praiseworthy comments to your glorious narrator and show super thanks, and that you reflect on this accumulation of evidence and what it shows you with regard to the behavior of a narcissist. I'm HG Tudor, thank you for listening.